Hi friends, Miss Liz here. Today we are making blueberry muffins with a crumble top. These are one of my favorite muffins. Super tasty, easy to do for breakfast. Really, really good. So I'm gonna give you a couple of tips. Number one, if blueberries are hard to find because they're out of season, you can absolutely use frozen. Something else I like to do for both this and for my scones is I'll do a berry medley. So it has a combination of blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, and strawberries. This is so tasty. You can think of it as if you go to a bakery and you get a triple berry muffin. That's kind of what you've got here, or like a triple berry scone. So this is my favorite frozen fruit blend to use in pretty much any of my baked goods. You can definitely use fresh fruit if you prefer and it's in season, but sometimes it's hard to find or it's really expensive if it's out of season. So frozen fruit works beautifully, and mixing up those berry flavors to get some of the sweet and some of the tart is a great idea. So if you're gonna use frozen fruit, pull it out of the freezer so that it can soften just a little bit, maybe like half an hour before you need it, just so it's not completely rock hard when you go to use it. If you forget, it's not a big deal. You can use it completely frozen. It is going to release more moisture into your muffin, which might make them take a little bit longer to bake, but that's totally okay. All right, so to get started, we're going to start with mixing up all of our powdered ingredients, and then we're going to add the liquid to it, okay? So I'm going to start with my flour, and I'm going to do 2 cups of flour. If you're gonna scoop directly from your bag, make sure that you are being very, very very gentle so that you're not compressing the flour, kind of shaking off the excess. Do not pack or forcefully shove your scoop down into your bag because you're gonna end up with too much. If you end up with a pile of too much, brush it off, shake it off. Don't ever compress your flour down in there because you're gonna get too much. We don't wanna do that, okay? So I have 2 cups of flour. Now, there are different opinions on how to mix your dry ingredients, whether sugar counts as a wet ingredient or a dry ingredient. In my opinion, sugar is a wet ingredient because it dissolves when it becomes wet. So I will add the sugar when I'm doing my wet ingredients. So I've got my flour here. I'm gonna do baking powder, and we're gonna do 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Make sure you scrape off that top so that we don't end up with too much. Just 1.5 and 2 teaspoons of baking powder. All right, we're gonna do a little bit of salt, just 1/4 of a teaspoon, which is half of a half. 1/4 a teaspoon of salt, okay? So that's all my dry ingredients, easy peasy, okay? Just gonna stir those just a tad, okay? And then I'm gonna set that to the side, grab a bowl for our wet ingredients. Okay. All right, so for the wet ingredients, I have 1/2 cup. Now you can use oil, or I like to use melted butter. Works the same, just make sure it's nice and liquid and not piping hot. After you melt it, let it sit for a little bit so that it can kind of cool down, okay? But either way, 1/2 cup of oil or 1/2 cup of melted butter, okay? And then we're also gonna do 3/4 a cup of sugar. 3/4, so there's a 1/2 and a 1/4. Keep my scoop. And then we're also gonna do 1/2 cup of milk. Grab that out of the fridge. Now this can be whatever milk you have on hand at your house. If you don't use cow's milk, you can definitely use a coconut milk, almond milk, soy milk, oat milk. Whatever your preference is totally fine. 1/2 cup of milk. All right. My spoon and just kind of stir that a little so that that sugar can kind of dissolve. The milk and the butter can combine. Just like that. right. And then we're gonna do 1 egg. Ooh, good crack. It's very satisfying when you get a good crack on the first cap. All right, break up that yolk. Kind of stir it together here. Try to get that kind of combined. We want to make sure that the albumin, the egg white, isn't just floating around separately. We want to try to break that down at least. It's going to help our muffin get nice and fluffy. All right. And we're going to add this. You can do it either way, flour to wet. Some people find that easier. I'm actually going to pour it into the dry. I'm going to create kind of a puddle in the center and gently fold it in. And then you scrape from the outside of the bowl into the center. This is a very gentle way of mixing your dry ingredients together. This is going to help my muffin be nice and fluffy, especially since I'm adding all of that fruit with the extra moisture in it. I want to make sure that I'm keeping these muffins as fluffy as possible. So very gently folding it in. Okay. So you can see it's kind of a wet, sticky dough here. The last thing I'm going to add before the fruit is my vanilla. And I am going to do 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So there's a half and 1. And I am just going to stir this until combined. I don't want to overmix my vanilla. Scraping down all the way to the bottom, make sure I don't have any more pockets of flour hiding. Right, just like that, okay? All right, so then I'm gonna add my fruit, and I'm gonna do 2 cups. All right. Oh, it smells good. And then I'm just gonna fold these in, which means I'm just gonna stir until they're mixed in and then stop. You might get a little bit of tie-dye action from the broken berries. Not a big deal. Okay. Just like that, beautiful. All right, so what I have here, I have my trusty old muffin pan with some liners. I like to use an ice cream scoop with a little plunger, especially because this batter is a little thicker and we have the chunks of berries. Get a nice level scoop. Big old strawberry there. There we go. And just drop it right in. So we're gonna fill these liners, and then after the liners are filled, then we'll make our crumble top to put on the top of these. Now, if you come across any really large berries or a cluster of berries that are still stuck together, if you're using frozen, you can definitely use a knife and cut that up if you don't want a giant entire like strawberry in your muffin. Or you can leave it, totally up to you. If I have a really large strawberry that's going to take up my entire muffin, then I obviously will cut that one up, but I like the big chunks of berries in mine. All right, now depending on how many berries you add, what kind of berries, you usually get at least a dozen muffins out of this, sometimes 16. Just kind of depends on what you've added to it and how full your scoops are when you're measuring. So we'll see. I think I'm gonna get 14, maybe 15. I think we're gonna do 14. I've got a few in here that could add just a little bit more batter, make them a little bit bigger. Now it's important with muffins not to overfill. You hear people talk about muffin top when it overflows. It's okay if it goes over a little, but because of the liquid in these berries, if they overflow too much, it becomes really hard to get them out of the pan. So I try really hard not to overfill this pan. All right, I'm gonna set this to the side. Wipe off my hands really quick. And we're gonna make our crumble top. Now for the crumble top, we just need sugar, flour, and a few tablespoons of soft butter, not melted this time. Okay, so I'm gonna use this bowl actually. I'm just gonna rinse it out. Okay, just rinsing it out, and then I have this is what I call my mess towel when my hands get sticky and I just need to wipe them off without actually scrubbing. I'll scrub my hands when I'm done. But I have a towel that I use for my sticky hands, and then it goes in the laundry when I'm done. So I'll dry that off. All right, so we're gonna do half a cup of sugar and half a cup of flour. So where's my scoop? Here we go. Let me rinse this off too. Has berry juice on it. All right. So since I already used this in the batter, I'm going to use my clean scoop here from my flour and sift this in. So half a cup of flour and half a cup of sugar. And then we're gonna do 3 tablespoons of a soft butter, okay, not melted. So just like 3 tablespoons, nice and soft where you can kind of smush it. We're gonna drop that down in there, and you can either use a whisk or a fork, which is what I'm gonna use. You can tell I've been doing a lot of baking in here. I've got flour all over my floor right now. So what I'm doing with the fork is I'm just kind of chopping the butter up against the side, kind of like when we made biscuits, crumbling it up into the flour mixture, because we want this to be a crumble top on top of our blueberry muffins. So similar to when we made biscuits, we're just kind of chopping it up till we get nice small little pieces that we can easily sprinkle on top of a muffin. Just kind of crumbly. If you have any like really big chunks of butter, try to get those smashed up. I say smaller than a marble. If it's like the size of a nickel, maybe break it up just a little bit. Okay. So then what I'm gonna do, I'm actually gonna use this 1/4 of a cup here. I'm just gonna sprinkle a little bit on the top of each one, and it's gonna look really dry. That's okay. Again, we're making a crumble top, not a streusel. A streusel is has a little bit more moisture, and so it becomes crisp. With this, we want it to stay crumbly on top of the muffin. It'll harden a little bit when that butter melts, but for the most part, it'll have a nice crumble finish and stay kind of soft. generous coat. You'll probably have a little bit extra if you don't have a full 18. That's okay. You don't have to use it all. All right. Okay. So then these are gonna go into the oven at 425 for just 5 minutes. What that does is it helps the muffin to dome, so it gets a really nice lift right in the center when we have that high heat. And then we drop the temperature down to 350 to finish the baking process. But when you want a really high lift, and usually when people think of a blueberry muffin, you think of that really high dome top. So starting it at 425 for just that 5 minutes is going to give it a high rise really quick. And then finishing the baking process at 350 is going to give us that nice fluffy muffin texture and make sure we don't overbake. So 5 minutes at 425, and then drop your temperature down to 350 and finish baking about another 16 minutes. So they'll be in the oven for about 21 minutes total usually. Make sure you don't overbake. Overbaking muffins causes them to be very, very dry and not a pleasant texture. So make sure you're checking them so that they aren't overbaked. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message, post in the classroom. I'm happy to help, and enjoy your muffins.